Good afternoon, parents. My name is Mark Sikes, your Associate Dean of Students and Director of Parent and Family Programs. I am happy to welcome you to our family webinar. Today we have an amazing presenter lined up for you. Before I introduce her, I wanted to give you a couple of tips about our Zoom software. First, you may need to adjust the volume on your screen and please mute your microphone. Again, let me say, everyone please mute your microphone so that we don't get any feedback between your speakers and the microphone. We have also tried to, for this particular presentation, we've disabled the video feature for this webinar since we have nearly 200 parents joining us today. Also, you should see a chat window. If you're having problems or anything that you'd like to ask, you can do it in the chat window. I will be communicating on behalf of our host, and I will also be responding and reading your text in the chat window. Our session today includes a presentation on study abroad and will last approximately 20 to 25 minutes. At the end of the presentation, there will be an option for you to ask questions. We have learned that the best way for you to communicate your questions is to send them via the chat window. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website, www.wm.edu/parents. Now let's get started. Our presenter today, Sylvia Mittendorfer, is from the Global Education Office. Sylvia leads the Global Education Office, which administers study abroad and exchange programs, hosts incoming exchange students, and manages the Cross-Cultural Collaborations Summer Program here at William & Mary. And presently, she manages over $450,000 for study abroad scholarships. She works closely with faculty and departments to advance the global education programs and initiatives at the university and make global education experiences accessible to students as much as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited and proud to turn over our program to Sylvia.
Thank you, Mark. I hope everyone can hear me. And so welcome to the webinar. I would like to just reiterate what Mark mentioned. I think we're still getting some feedback from some other phones, so if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and mute your microphone so that we don't get echo effects. At any rate, I'm delighted to get to meet you virtually via this webinar and hope we'll have a chance to meet you when you're next on campus and or, of course, that your son and daughter stop by our offices. We work closely with students and look forward to welcoming your students and you as well when you're on campus. So with that said, let me begin. And Mark, I don't know if you can switch to the next slide. There we go. Great. So we talk about why study abroad. So we'll get into some of the logistics, some of the details, some of the types of programs we offer. But before we do that, I want to reiterate why we think study abroad is so important. And I say we here in the context of William & Mary. William & Mary has study abroad as part of its strategic goal. And most interestingly, also, you might have heard about the Call 300 requirement. More than half of students will meet that objective through study abroad, and that's pretty innovative to be able to recognize not only the value in individual classes or individual departments, majors, but also to take study abroad and put it into the general education requirement. But again, taking that moment to say, why is that important? We see study abroad as an opportunity to advance academic pursuits. So we expect our students to be studying when they're overseas. Usually students are going for courses related to their majors, or if they're going earlier in their career, to explore and meet other requirements or objectives in that liberal arts education. We also see beyond the classroom this as opportunities for personal growth and development, the many things that we think about, this holistic experience of being an undergraduate student and the years the knowledge that can come during those years. And part of that comes through by taking students out of their familiar context, placing them in a context of being able to see different... Okay. Can everyone hear me again? I think there was a mute going on there. And so we believe that these experiences are really valuable for your students. And we hear this so often from our alumni, that these experiences were really instrumental for them. Our students come back. In fact, we just welcomed a cohort back and had a number of events last week with our Career Center and with other opportunities for students to engage and use their study abroad experiences. And so much of this now is about, I feel so much more prepared for the next step beyond college. So having said that, let's get into some of the more nitty gritty. Mark, would you be able to switch me? Okay, great, perfect. So what does study abroad at W&M Mary look like? Again, we have lots and lots of opportunities. One of the difficulties is actually to try to explain what are hundreds and hundreds of different choices for your students. You can see our students are going to many different places. At this point, we're getting very close to the university strategic goal of 60% study abroad participation, and we do have many students who participate in multiple study abroad experiences. And referencing back again to what I mentioned earlier with the curriculum, all programs that are through our office, where your students are working to go abroad through our office, all count automatically for Call 300. They do not need to petition separately for it. And so again, it's very seamless and integrated into the academic experience. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when do students go abroad? Summer is often when students begin the experience. So it may be when students come to W&M Mary, they say, I know I want to study abroad, and when can I go? And usually that is the summer after freshman year. We are starting, and I'll talk about winter in a few minutes, to grow those, so that could become an opportunity moving forward as well. But again, summertime is often when our students first have their international experience. The semester programs continue to be an important component of the study abroad options for students. They are generally during junior year, but we are seeing that certain majors are seeing second semester of sophomore year as being best for sequencing. And so we encourage students to talk about study abroad if they're interested early on with their academic advisors, or also to come see us in our office, because we can talk and say, look, this is what your department has been telling us. Here are some things to think about in terms of sequencing. And then lastly, our winter programs. This is an area where we historically have had only very few. This past winter, actually just a few days ago, last week, we had a program return from Oman and studying music and geology and the intersections of nature and culture. This is the second time that program has run. We also just had a group return from winter break for a introductory Chinese program. So students who have not studied Chinese before, who want to be able to experience, and who maybe are considering pursuing studies or regional studies or linguistic studies moving forward. Now, beginning in winter 2021, so not next winter, but the year after, the academic calendar of W&M Mary actually begins to shift a little bit. And our spring semester will start a little later, giving our winter break a little bit more time to be able to do different things. And so we're working very closely with faculty to develop more options moving forward. Most winters, we have just a few opportunities, but again, starting in 2021, we're going to expect more of those. And those two, as long as they are 3 credits, will count towards completing the Call 300 requirement. Okay, next slide. So you might start hearing from your students about all these different kinds of programs, and so I thought it might be helpful to lay out what types of programs we offer. W&M Mary sponsored semester programs are ones that, and there's only 3 to 4 of those at a given time, they are ones where W&M Mary has had a curricular connection with those programs. W&M Mary exchange programs are where W&M Mary have partnerships with universities across the world, and as long as we keep our exchanges in balance, those opportunities are for our students to go there and their students to come here. And so those are really wonderful opportunities for students to be part of this flow of students, and often very long-term commitments. William & Mary faculty-led short-term programs are mostly in the summer and again some in the winter, where William & Mary faculty go abroad with students for programs that are designed and very much connected to William & Mary as a result. And many students talk about the community these build, these living learning communities, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the programs in a few minutes. And last but certainly not least is this very large category of non-William & Mary programs. These are programs that could be either through another U.S. university, through a university abroad, or even through organizations that specialize in study abroad programs that have accreditation behind it in order to ensure credit transfer. And so that's a really broad range. That's where when you look at our website, there are hundreds of choices, and our advisors are here also to help students parse through that and see what it is that they're looking for. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you an example because we can't cover the 45 plus William & Mary programs in depth, but I wanted to give you an example of a semester program. This one is La Plata, Argentina. It's just outside of Buenos Aires, and it is a program where we partner with a human rights organization and a local university, and there are some courses that are crafted specifically for William & Mary students. This is the Commission for Memory, and the theme that goes through, the human rights theme that goes through this is in the classroom. It's in the homestays where the students are, and it's in the internship components that students do. And so again, the idea it's a holistic, integrated experience that then also connects to faculty research here at William & Mary. And so some students have been a part of projects either before going, while they're abroad, or when they're there that work closely with William & Mary faculty here on campus on many of these issues. So that's an example. Again, it's intentionally designed for William & Mary, and only William & Mary students are in that core component of courses, and then they get to take some courses at the Coast University. Next example, next slide, please. This is a little bit of information about tuition exchange programs. So as I mentioned, this is where William & Mary gets to send students to a host university and they get to send a student to us. It is a reciprocal agreement, so we are always, what we offer in any given year depends on where we are in balance, but many parents find this very helpful in terms of future planning because you are able to pay regular William & Mary tuition and fees, additional costs like housing and meals and transportation, of course, but the housing and meals portion may be paid to the host university, but you have regularity, and so things like payment plans and other things are all seamless in this process. And students go for 1 or 2 semesters. These come back as transfer credit, and the GPA requirements come from our host institutions, but they usually are around a 3.0, I'm sorry, as mentioned here. Great, next slide. This is an example, list of examples of some of the countries and programs. We have more partnerships than this, but these are just give you some examples. And as I mentioned, some of them do rotate in and out, but you can see they're scattered all over the world. Okay, next slide, please. The other category I mentioned are the William & Mary faculty-led short-term programs, again, summer, sometimes winter break, and these are real opportunities for cross-cultural and kind of community learning where William & Mary students are together with William & Mary faculty and find ways of engaging with the community where they are. One notable piece, as mentioned at the bottom of the slide, is that I mentioned all the programs through our office, including third party, receive Call 300 credit, but some of our faculty-led short-term programs also have additional courses because they're often taking more than one course that are called 200s. And so students, if they're taking 2 courses abroad, for example, may be able to get Call 300 for one course and a Call 200 for the other course. So again, in terms of planning for curriculum and the kinds of courses that you can expect, there are these possibilities as well. All right, next slide, please. This is an example of how we think about collaborative learning and engagement. One of the programs that is offered regularly is in Cape Town, South Africa. We work with an NGO that's associated with the University of Cape Town, where students have opportunities to to volunteer and work in the townships with local learners. And then and they take 2 courses as well. And one of those courses depends each year on the W&M Mary faculty member who leads the program. This year, as has happened a few other times, Professor Leah Glenn from Theater, Speech, and Dance leads the program. And she works then with local learners, with local dance companies, and our students to have this sharing of experiences, learning across cultures, learning from each other, and this really amazing opportunity to engage with others in Cape Town and again, share dance practices. Next slide, please. These are some of other examples of where we're offering this summer. The Rio de Janeiro program is an opportunity for students to take, if they don't have no Portuguese required beforehand, and then also courses each year on Brazilian studies. It's a month-long program. The Go in Bangalore program has a globalization, in this case, art history, religious studies angle for this year. Again, the general themes stay the same. The specific courses may change year to year. The Dublin Mason School Business is a minor program, so students take actually 15 credits over the summer. It's a full summer, and then they take one other course here on campus before, after, and that gets them a business minor. It's very focused, and it's students, if you're a business major, you're not eligible for this program because it's a minor, right? So it's its own freestanding program. So that's another example of very focused, theme-based. Next slide, please. These are a couple more examples. Again, some of them involve moving. So we have a number of programs that travel across different country or within a country across different locations. The Santiago de Compostela, Spain program is actually physically walking part of the Camino de Santiago. And so again, that's a very different way of experiencing local in its pilgrimage studies. And each year we have different faculty. There are 2 W&M Mary faculty who have different courses that they teach before, during, and during the experience of walking. And so you see a picture there. For example, Potsdam, Germany is an example of a program that's a language study. So in this case, students have to have language prerequisites, but at the same time, they are also taking a German studies course. Again, this year it's about Berlin, the city, which is right beside Potsdam, kind of it almost bleeds into each other. And so in that way is a tremendous resource for our students. And there are a whole host of language study programs as well. So these are just a couple examples of what your student might be able to do this summer. Next slide, please. This is the list of the 2019 W&M Mary Summer Programs. So you can see they're really scattered all over the world. We're really excited to have a few new options. Mauritius and Rwanda are 2 new programs that we have that have come to our portfolio this year. Mauritius is on public health law and like a legal, it's taught by one of our law faculty, and the Rwanda program is in collaboration with our School of Education's counseling program looking at post-conflict resolution. Great. Next slide, please. This is, as I mentioned earlier, some recent winter programs. The Oman program just returned last week. Again, it's an intersection. We've had Southeast Asia business focus programs. And again, we ran a winter program this year as introductory Chinese, and we're hoping to run that one again next winter. Next slide, please. So here are some of the nitty-gritty logistics. People will often ask, especially if you've transferred in a lot of credits, how do the grades work? W&M Mary faculty-led programs, the Sevilla and La Plata semester programs. So Sevilla is one of our sponsored semester programs. They'll come back as W&M Mary credits and grades, because these are actually courses that have been designed and connected with W&M Mary. All the rest of the programs are transfer credit. Students, just like any other transfer credit process, have to get a C or better in order to courses to transfer. As I mentioned, Call 300 is for all. In terms of application requirements, really the most important part is that students are in academic and conduct good standing, so they're not eligible if they're on probation while they would be abroad. Some Different programs have different requirements. You can imagine for the language programs that previous language study is important. Again, as I mentioned, sometimes there are GPA requirements from our exchange partners. We have one of our other sponsored semester programs is in Oxford, and they have very high academic expectations, and it's a very competitive process. And so you can imagine their GPA requirements are a little bit higher. And each of those programs can vary a little bit, but we do work very hard to have as many of our programs accessible to students across the board. And we encourage students to come in and learn a little bit more about what those program choices are. In terms of deadlines, the one I want to point out most pressingly right now is the February 1st deadline, which of course is just around the corner. That's for all of the William & Mary summer faculty-led programs. It's not too late to begin. Students have to write an essay, but again, it's very doable. This is not like entrance for William & Mary, and they do need a recommendation letter. So again, that's probably the thing I would encourage students to work on first, is to identify and talk with a faculty member, and then they request the online recommendation, the request through our online system. But again, we always recommend students talk to someone before this automated message gets sent. Then we head right into a whole series of other deadlines. Their semester and fall deadlines come in, our fall semester and full year deadlines. For most of our programs, our own programs will be in March, and then for non-William & Mary programs in April. One note that I want to point out for deadlines is for the Oxford program, again, one of our sponsored semester programs, that deadline, because of our partner institutions requirements, is actually December 1st of the year before, including if you're going for spring. So if you're thinking about going for full year, fall of junior year, or spring of junior year, the deadline to apply is December 1st of sophomore year. And so again, thinking about if Oxford is something your student is interested in, we usually have our information sessions later this semester and also early in the fall semester, but we have an advisor who works really closely, our faculty advisor as well as our student advisor, with students in that lead up to the process. So your students are encouraged to come in and come talk to us and get the ball rolling early for that. But most of the time the rule is the semester before, but always good to check ahead. Next slide, please. Funding. We know money questions are super important, and one of the things that we talk a lot about, trying to reduce barriers for students to go have these experiences. Financial is certainly one of the ones we've very much been focusing on, in addition to making things possible for curriculum and offering different times for students who have other commitments here on campus. But going back to funding, Mark mentioned we have a great pool of funding. In fact, this year it's now up to $530,000 in study abroad scholarships for 2018. Those are designated on top of whatever financial aid students might be able to take with them, and it generally is portable. And most of the, not all, but most of the $530,000 is in need-based, but there's also some very generous merit funding in that. Much of the scholarships, so there's scholarships for all the different terms, but there's a particularly large pool of scholarships for the summer programs, because we recognize that those are extra expenses beyond what might be incurred during the academic year. And so again, the deadlines for their scholarships for the summer study abroad scholarships is also February 1st. So that way students can do it all at once, and we will let students know what time of decision, whether they've gotten into their program, also how much in scholarship funding they will get, so that they have a better sense of what the financial impact would be. And we work very closely with the financial aid office, who's wonderful, and work with our students to kind of integrate what the actual cost of the program is. So we send in what are called consortium agreements outlining what the cost of the programs are, including things like airfare, international airfare, which you may or may not have currently on your expenses to come to William & Mary. And then they adjust based on the actual costs. And then lastly, but equally important, we work very closely with a number of external funding sources as we're trying to leverage any and all resources that we can. And so my colleagues and I work with some of the national scholarships out there and can help your student apply for those or connect with individuals who can. With those, I would say planning early is always key. And so if your student is thinking about how am I going to pay for study abroad, the earlier coming to talk to us, the better, because some of those national scholarships have very early deadlines. So next slide, please. So again, this is a little bit more about the financials. In terms of the William & Mary faculty-led and sponsored programs, they have a fee that is set. And so that's not, you don't pay the William & Mary tuition and fees plus this. It's just its own fee that includes academic costs, but also housing and usually some partial board. The details of what's covered are on our website, and they are just consistent for all students across the board, especially with the exception of the Oxford program, which is just has a higher price tag because of the costs of what we're charged from Oxford. The most of the semester sponsor programs are actually very similar, and then sometimes just below or just right at the in-state tuition. And again, that applies for all students regardless of their residential status. William & Mary exchange programs, as I mentioned, you continue to pay William & Mary tuition fees on campus, and then you pay at this time a $375 off-campus study abroad fee and $170 for a semester for international health and evacuation insurance, which is a mandatory requirement. And then you pay directly whatever costs you might have. And then for non-William & Mary programs, you have the same off-campus and insurance fees, and then you pay all other costs directly to the host program. But that host program will sign a kind of what's called a consortium agreement where they indicate what the real costs are. So even though you're not paying that through William & Mary for those experiences, it's still a recognized academic cost, so your financial aid package can be adjusted in that way. Next slide, please. So this is last but not least, it's actually, of course, what's first and foremost on our mind, which is that health and safety. And so I just wanted to reiterate again that this is something that is, of course, primary in our minds for trying to make any and all international opportunities possible, and we're always looking for risk mitigating measures. We have an international travel and security manager. He, I, and many others are on call 24/7 and provide support for students if there are emergencies, but also, very importantly, is constantly on the scouring to find out what's happening in the world, working very closely with State Department, with other agencies. Part of our insurance, health insurance and evacuation insurance actually has a security company associated, which also gives us regular updates. And so there's a lot of that information gathering, information sharing, and continual assessment. And we have a number, of course, of health and safety protocols and pre-departure orientations, which include, of course, very importantly, health and safety criteria. As I mentioned earlier, we do have an international medical and evacuation insurance. It's required, and we've worked very closely, and they've been very helpful in a number of situations. And then we also have a travel policy, alert policy. So if your student is thinking about going to a country that perhaps under old terms, the State Department changed its what had previously been called travel warning policy to travel alert risk ratings. And so on our website is a list of countries where in order for students to go, they need to go through some extra vetting. These are countries where we've identified concerns about risks and where the university wants to take a look a little bit more closely to see where's the student going, what on-site supports, and what preparation does the student have before making a determination. So next slide, please. Next steps. We really encourage you and the students to check out our website. Our office, the Global Education Office, is located in the Reef Center, which is kind of by that confusion corner and near the Wren building. And we're from 11 to 5, we're available with peer advisors there. We're certainly in the office much earlier than that, but that's when we have staffing for peer advisors. These are students who are trained. They do workshops throughout the day. You don't have to RSVP. We also have the Study Abroad 101 on our website for students who want to get kind of a jump start while they're still in their dorm room. And really, we're here to work with, and then we have a team of staff advisors who are also available and work with students to help them find the programs that they're looking for and guide them through that process. And next slide, please. So with that, I look forward to getting your questions, and I really appreciate you taking this time to learn more about study abroad and supporting your students through this journey. Thank you.
Sylvia, I've got, if parents, you have a question, please continue to have your phone or computer muted. Send them through the text chat window, and I'll ask them as we have time to do so. Our first question comes from Joseph. Does every study abroad program provide enough credit hours so students are not behind in credits so that they can graduate on time?
Thanks for that question. That's super important, of course, that students stay on schedule. And so if in summer programs, of course, students are often adding extra credits, or winter programs. During the semester, students are required to take at least 12 credits while they're abroad. So it's the same as here on campus, between 12 and maximum of 18 credits that they can take, but they're required to take 12 credits. In fact, when they get there, they have to have their host institution verify that they have enrolled in at least the equivalent of 12 credits, because we really, really want to make sure that there aren't any unpleasant surprises. Students are encouraged and asked to have the courses as best as they can before they go pre-approved. So as part of that process before they leave, they would propose some courses that they're thinking about taking. And in some programs, they know exactly what they're going to take and they have the syllabi. And some programs where maybe they're directly enrolling at a university and there are 1,000 choices, they're going to pre-approve, ideally, as many extra ones as they can of things that they might want to take, and work with the different departments so that they have a clear vision of what it is that they would like to, what they're taking and how that's going to translate back. Even if they're not going to do the full pre-approval ahead of time, these are conversations that they can have with their department to understand, what courses might work. And so for some, there is the opportunity then to do a post-approval at the end. But this is really critical for us, and we monitor that very carefully, especially, our exchange partners are very well aware of this. And again, many of these programs, we send students back and forth regularly. And so our faculty here are very aware of which programs are. It depends a little bit on each department, how they handle those courses. But again, that's very much on our mind for the semester programs. Mm-hmm. And in the summer and winter, it's just extra, of course. And many students do make up some courses that way as well.
Sylvia, what are the specific differences, again, between a William & Mary sponsored program versus any others?
Okay. So William & Mary sponsored program is a program where we have set up some structures that are really designed to work closely with William & Mary. All of the William & Mary sponsored programs have faculty liaisons who work very closely with the students and with the local faculty. Again, in Sevilla and La Plata especially, there are actually courses that are co-designed with our faculty here, and where there's a lot of that close collaboration academically, which is why they come back as William & Mary credits. Other programs like exchanges, although many of the sponsor programs, actually all the sponsor programs, also have a component of taking courses at a local institution, exchange programs are truly kind of switching into that other institution and being a student fully in that other institution for all their academic work. In terms of billing, there's a big difference in the sense of, well, not big difference, but there's a difference in structure. One is that the exchange is your regular tuition and fees to William & Mary versus the sponsored, which has a set program fee.
Do students need to apply for a visa in the country of study concurrently or with the application or before?
It varies significantly, and it's one of the things that we work with students, and ultimately then the student works with the consulate. There are programs that don't require visas for U.S. citizens, and there are others that do. And of course, we also have a lot of international students or others who are navigating different visa paths. And so it just really, really depends on the country. I wish there was a simple answer to that, but the visa processing times are some things that we factor into our deadlines, or that other third-party organizations do, so that students have the opportunity to make sure that they can get their acceptance and their documentation in time to apply for the visa. Ultimately, all visa decisions, however, are of course made by a consulate or embassy. And so again, one of the advantages we have is that we're not too far from DC, but there are some countries that require students to actually have in-person interviews. And so again, students generally then may need to go up to DC. There are many of those, but there are a few out there.
Is the scholarship always dependent on GPA, or are there partial scholarships possibilities? That comes from Jeffrey.
Okay. There are a variety of different scholarships. So there are a few merit scholarships, which certainly factor in GPA more strongly. The majority of the scholarships are not merit, however, they're financial aid need, and financial need is really the driving force. Students have an opportunity to write an essay to supplement their application, and then we work really closely with the financial aid office as well.
My next question is, I'm getting a lot of questions, will this presentation be online? Yes, it will be online as soon as my student comes in tomorrow, and we'll upload it. Everyone that registered for this webinar, I'm actually going to send the video link to you tomorrow. This is a brand new software for us. This is the first time that I'm using it, and I did not realize that we could only have 100 people on per session. And so there's going to be a lot of people that will get the presentation emailed to them. Does transfer credit mean the grades count towards GPA?
Great question. Transfer credit means that the course shows up, but the grades do not calculate into the GPA. So as long as students get a C or better and get the pre or post approval to have, a connection to be approved by W&M Academic Department, it'll be credit, but it will not factor into the calculation.
Is there a downside to my student waiting until first semester senior year to study abroad?
We have a few students who do that. They have to get special permission, however, for there's a final 2-semester residency requirement. And there are some potential challenges with that. So if students are going on programs where they're taking courses not through W&M Mary, which even our W&M Mary sponsored programs are in collaboration with local universities, that means we cannot transfer credit back or bring back credit, even for La Plata and Sevilla, until we have those transcripts. And that can sometimes take a while, and it just starts getting really, really kind of tight and down to the wire. And we would hate for your student not to fully have all of that be settled before they start the spring semester, and they likely wouldn't have that information yet. So, we've had some students do it, but there are some potential challenges, and program choice is particularly important in this, in terms of what the timing of getting the transcripts is from a given institution or partner.
Our next question is, do we have a study abroad program in Iceland, especially for students who may be interested in geothermal energy?
That's great. That would be really exciting. We don't have our own program, but we have actually a pretty steady stream of students who are going on a study abroad provider program that's based in Iceland that looks at some of those things, and that some faculty here at W&M Mary have supported as well, have been very interested in for our students.
If a student is receiving partial financial aid at W&M Mary, can we assume that they will receive a proportional amount towards costs for the summer programs? And if that doesn't materialize and thus the trip is unaffordable, is the deposit refundable under those circumstances?
Great question. So the summer financial aid, and I don't want to speak for a financial aid office. Ultimately, I encourage you to talk with your financial aid counselor. My understanding is that financial aid availability is just much more limited in the summer. And it's for that reason that we have so much of our financial aid, our scholarship money allocated for the summer. So the way this practically works for W&M Mary faculty-led summer program is that there's a February 1st deadline. It's the same deadline as for the scholarships. While we're reviewing applicants for the study abroad piece, we're also reviewing the study abroad scholarship applicants, working with financial aid on need information and all those kinds of things, with then students finding out before they make their deposit what both their what program if they've been accepted to the program where they applied, and then also what the scholarship amount would be. That information then gets sent to financial aid so that they can package, and so that your student would know before the deposit deadline what is the full financial aid picture. But it will depend on individual students. And again, my understanding is generally there's not as much summer financial aid, and therefore that's why the scholarship piece is really, really critical in all of this. And we hear regularly from students, it's through the scholarship that they were able to go abroad for the summer. And I should say, for the Summer William Mary faculty-led programs we have that are through Arts and Science, so with the exception of the Mason program, we have two, and there are scholarships for the Dublin program as well. But for the others, there are two what we call Global Opportunity Scholarships, GO scholarships, that are actually the full cost of the program plus $1,000 towards travel, and that's need-based.
Which summer programs in 2019 satisfy the Call 200?
There are a few. I'd have to look through a list real quick, but I encourage you to look on the website. Let me take a look here. In Cambridge, it looks like we have actually a slew of Call 200s. So again, you take 2 courses in Cambridge. One of them will have to count for, you have the choice. Usually what happens is a student takes one Call 200 and one other course so that it becomes a Call 300 and Call 200. But in theory, someone could do 2 Call 200s and not take the Call 300. You just cannot count one course for 2 of the call requirements. I hope that if that makes sense. So Cambridge looks like they have one, and this isn't, I would say, not comprehensive. I'm just glancing through some lists here. I think there are a few others. The Santiago de Compostela has a Call 200, and again, there may be a few others in there that I'm just not seeing right now.
Our next question is, what is the typical acceptance rates for the summer program?
I know I was just talking to some recently admitted who've just gone through the college application process, and that's obviously a very different kind of process. We try to make study abroad as accessible to as many students as possible. So, generally, obviously the prerequisites of being a good academic and conduct standing, not being on probation, those kinds of things are key, meeting whatever prerequisites the programs have, particularly language requirements for the language courses. That aside, generally students have very good chances of being able to get their program. When we see that there's over demand in something, we then try to develop programs moving forward to adjust to that. But every year I will say there are 1 or 2 programs that get competitive, even that we didn't anticipate. All of a sudden, I guess the talk on the street is everyone wants to go to fill in the blank. I don't quite know yet what that is for this year, since we haven't met the deadline yet. But again, those students, even if they don't get their first choice, would get an opportunity to go, if they meet the qualifications, would get opportunities to go to a different program. But generally, we try to have students be able to get the program that they can. Some of our exchange partners, again, those are limited spaces, so some of them can be competitive. I would say with St. Andrews, that's a very competitive exchange program, but the good news there is that we can also send students directly, and so we're usually able to accommodate all students. It may just be through a direct enrollment, still through our office, and so there are a couple ways that we try to help students.
If a student is doing a semester abroad program, is it reasonable to expect that courses will count towards their major and not just graduation?
That's our goal, that students are going abroad to take courses related to their major. So of course it depends on their course choices, but generally that is what happens. So students are, as I mentioned, by the time they go abroad, they're usually second semester, sophomore year, or junior year. So they've declared their major, they know what they're studying, and therefore are focusing in on those. Some of the programs that they're going to are incredibly thematically based. So they might be taking a really intensive focus on their on their major. Others will, and those students sometimes will have double majors and say, this semester I'm really focusing on this. Others will take a variety of courses. And so it does depend on the students, but it is our expectation that we want students to progress in not only just their overall degrees, but in their field of study, their majors.
When are students notified if they've gotten into a program?
So there's well, it depends. So, sorry. If for programs that we run ourselves, those are notifications for the summer programs, for example, usually come about 3 weeks after the decision. And again, for the summer programs, that notification also then is right at the same time coming with scholarship notifications. If they're applying to non-William & Mary programs, those timelines can vary a great deal. If they're applying to exchange programs or even like our sponsored Oxford program, what we do is we nominate. We send these candidates to the universities and say, here's who we believe, would be excellent candidates for you. They have the final decision on that. I would say, again, Oxford is the most competitive for that. The others, we generally have a good sense of what it is that they, and how many spaces they have for us. And so that can sometimes take a little bit longer. But again, students and their study abroad advisor would be working with the students throughout this process.
Our daughter is on a scholarship at the William & Mary Athletes Program, field hockey, and was told by her student academic advisor to check what the possibilities were. As being an international student already, does it interfere in any way with the William & Mary Summer Program?
So it would, we have, I would say, a large of the when athletes go abroad, summer is definitely one of those times where we have a lot of athletes who study abroad on William & Mary faculty-led programs. The exact timing, and so our summer programs are scattered throughout the summer. The first program actually starts the day after graduation this year, and the last one ends, I think, in the second week of August, and the average length is about 4 weeks. And so sometimes athletes are looking at when do they have competitions, when do they have practices. So again, looking at those pieces of things, what kind of workout facilities the student might need. And so we have information about that, as well as students who've done it before. And then we work really closely with their academic advisor in athletics as well to explore those possibilities. So I would encourage her to look at our website and come and talk to us.
Are there programs geared towards computer science students?
So the faculty-led programs vary each year. This year, we don't have a computer science program through one of the William & Mary faculty-led, but there are a number of programs, non-William & Mary programs, and exchange programs where we regularly send students who are studying computer science. There are many of the faculty in computer science are very supportive of this as well, and each department designates, I should say, a faculty member who serves as a liaison for study abroad. So they're a wonderful resource for the students, and also in our office we can see where students go. And there are some specialized programs, but also I would say often students are looking at direct enrollment options at universities or some third parties that have thematic tracks.
Our student is interested in programs in Japan. Are there programs in Japan?
We have 2 exchange programs in Japan. One is at Keio University in Tokyo, and the other is at Akita International University, a more rural setting. The Keio program has Japanese language requirements because it is a Japanese studies and regional studies, versus Akita does not. And so those are some things that they might want to take into consideration. And then we do work with another program called Ritsumeiken, which is not an exchange, but one that our faculty have identified as being particularly well aligned, and so that would be another option to look at. And then there are a number of other non-William & Mary affiliated programs that your student could look at. The ones I listed, the exchanges are for semester only, but Akita International has run a short-term program before, and Ritsumeiken has some short-term programs as well. And then there really are a number of other options. I should say we also host an incoming program from Japan. And so if your student is interested in Japan, I think in March or so, we'll be recruiting for what are called peer assistants, where we hire a cohort of students from William & Mary to accompany here in Williamsburg and in Washington, D.C., a group of Japanese students from Keio University who come here for an American Studies program. And it's a very immersive program that our students really welcome the opportunity to have too. And it is an application competitive, but it's something you might just want to flag for your student.
What happens if you register for more than 12 credits, but need to drop a class when you get there and end up with less than 12 credits?
That would be something that students need to contact us, and we work really closely with the Dean of Students office to see what is going on, what's the circumstance, and would work with the student to see if an exception of like lower enrollment could be possible. It's one of the things, different institutions have different add drop policies. Some are very strict and some are much more like you can add much later. So a lot will depend on the specific institution.
For semester-long exchange programs like the Cardiff, for example, is there typically a contingent of William & Mary students who attend, or could you potentially be the only one or one of a few?
These exchange programs tend to be quite small. So unlike St. Andrews, that's the one where there's usually a large grouping, and sometimes Exeter, the rest of them tend to be just a few students. It's possible theoretically that there would be only one. One of the benefits of the exchanges is that we also have students from that institution here. So it doesn't work out all the time, but often, especially if a student knows well ahead of time that this is an institution they're interested in, we usually have students from those kind of institutions here every year. And so what's been really great is we have different events where those students can meet each other. And so that can also be a wonderful way to feel like, well, there's someone who I've met before and who I look forward to meeting, or there will also be students that institution is planning to send the next semester. So that way they might have some people who are really interested in coming here and have some natural connections through that. But the idea really is for students to be able to have this experience of being enrolled at a different foreign institution.
Can you use funds from your 529 plan for study abroad?
There are students who are able to do that. It depends a little bit on the program for what the mechanics are. And so, that's a more specific advising question, but we encourage students to come talk to us and to the student accounts office as well.
Is it possible to apply after the deadline for summer programs? My son may have a summer internship, but if that doesn't work out, can he possibly apply after the deadline? And if so, what's the drop dead date?
Yeah, the summer faculty-led program timeline is very, very tight. There's just not much room in that, and things are usually moving forward very quickly. Students can petition late, but I would say it's really a very, very short window where there's anything that could be possible. These programs have pre-departure courses that begin. So all the William & Mary faculty programs have a 1-credit pre-course, and that begins like shortly after students are admitted. And so things are really moving forward. Again, with visa requirements and with other things, often there are a lot of external deadlines and timelines as well. So, I would say you should come talk to us because I would not want him banking on being able to do that.
My student is studying sciences and seems to think her options for going abroad are very limited. Is that true?
We have students across all the majors who go abroad. And so I think generally for some of the sciences, it's a lot about timing and planning and finding out, especially is it a semester or a summer, how to balance those different things. And different students have come to different ways of making it possible. But we do have students across the field. So there are some exchange partners where some of the science fields really know each other well. So if you, for example, were to go on the physics website, it specifically for semester study abroad outlines what courses at St. Andrews come back to here at W&M Mary. So that's like real clarity on what it is. Just because we have students regularly go in both directions there, and there's some other, certainly some other programs like that as well. We also see a fair amount of science students going abroad in the summer for faculty-led programs. Sometimes those courses are actually STEM fields. We had a chem, or I think it was organic chem 2 years ago. This summer in Cambridge, for example, we have 2 physics courses that are being offered. And, so it can vary. So each summer is a little bit different depending on the faculty who are leading. And then there are a number of other programs that specialize in various science fields as well. So I think early planning, talking with faculty, thinking about timing. Some of our STEM students are in labs, but we have, again, the winter term might be attractive to those students. Or in fact, there are, usually this year, there are 2 programs that start right after graduation and are only about 2 to 3 weeks long, and so allow students to be back early in the summer to still be able to go on go work, do an internship, or work in a lab, for example. We have those 2 programs this year are Guatemala, which is a development and action kind of program, and then the the Rwanda program that I mentioned earlier.
I missed the beginning of the meeting, so the question may have already been addressed. Is there a minimum GPA requirement for semester study abroad programs, or must a student simply be in good academic standing?
It will depend a little bit on the program. So in general, it's the latter, but then specific programs may have specific requirements. Our exchange programs, because of our exchange partners requirements, generally have a 3.0 requirement, with the exception of Oxford, which has a higher requirement. But they're also, for our own W&M Mary faculty-led programs, for example, we don't have, like the short term, we don't have minimum GPA requirements. And there are a number of third-party organizations that also have opportunities below a 3.0. And so I would say, with a few exceptions, generally students are able, even if they have less than a 3.0, are usually able to find a whole range of study abroad options.
How can students find out what the specific course offerings are for each program?
So for W&M Mary's short-term faculty-led programs, they are very limited amount of courses, like they're preset courses. Sometimes you have a choice of a couple. Sometimes it's like this program, these are the courses you're taking. Those are all on our website. So if they go to the specific program website, if you go through our website, which is you'll see at the bottom here, or it'll take you through the program listing, a whole list online, and they each have kind of an online page that goes through that. That will detail it for you. Other third-party programs that are very specifically thematically focused will have similar setups. So if you click through to their link, like they'll have information. And then there are other places, especially if you go on an exchange or a direct enrollment program at another university, just like a student coming here to W&M Mary, they'd be looking at a course catalog and just seeing, huge long lists of courses, and would then need to drill down and say, what department am I looking for? And recognize that just like here at W&M Mary, different semesters offer different courses, and so to have a kind of more broad perspective on what to offer generally.
Our last question this afternoon is, my son believes he can only apply to one summer program, and if he did not get accepted, would he not be able to do a study abroad this summer, or is there another way to indicate a backup choice?
Great question. Yes. So the system we have it set so it does only allow students to apply to one program. There's, I think, a field in there that might indicate like where might you want to go, or it may not even be there now. But if a student is not, like if a program becomes competitive, then, and a student is not admitted, then they are contacted early in this process, like not immediately after the deadline, but pretty early on, before the next set of deadlines, to be able to say, well, there's no space here, but as long as you've met all these qualifications, they're able to switch to a different program. What we didn't want is students applying to 6 programs and you don't really know which one they want to go to. And as you can imagine, especially if they do become competitive, how challenging that would be. And so this is really a clarity to be able to say, here's where I want to go. But then if they're not accepted, that's the beginning of a dialogue. So sometimes in those cases, and again, this isn't hugely prevalent. It's not like, we try to make this possible for as many students as possible. Students will usually just switch to a different W&M Mary program if there's space there and if they've met the qualifications. Or we can also work with them on non-W&M Mary programs, and most of those deadlines have not passed yet, and so they will have different opportunities as well. But for now, your student should really focus on the program where he wants to go and focus on that application specifically, and know that we'll continue to work with students if that does not pan out.
Well, Sylvia, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Family members, thank you so much for being patient with our first time using this software. I always use Sylvia first because she's always the easiest to use new software. So Sylvia, thank you for that. Parents, please be looking out for future webinars. I will send emails out at minimum of 2 weeks out, and I hope to talk to everyone soon. Thank you, Sylvia, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.